Today in the South Asheville community known as Mills Gap, we were reminded once again that a site that we in the community are intimately aware of as being highly toxic and very dangerous has been revealed to be exactly that, and this is the worst case scenario for our community. Over the last 25 years, EPA officials at Region 4 have not only documented the contaminant but understood it to be migrating. In June of 1990, the site was mishandled at that time. It was cleared from their inventory of hazardous sites in 1995, and in 1999 it revealed itself again with Bob Taylor calling in 9 years after Dave Ogren had called in to warn that this site was a threat. In 1990 there were 2 written warnings by state officials to the US EPA warning that the next door neighbors were being impacted by contamination from CTS. The sampling plan that was authorized on May 31st, 1990 and was officially signed off on June 13th, 1990 was not what was administered. What was called for were groundwater samples to be conducted at the site, and they were scrapped. One sample was moved to 800 feet from CTS onto a private property, the Rices. They confirmed that the contamination was migrating and that the levels they found were exceeding those that believed to be a human health risk. Nothing was done to safeguard the community. 9 years later, when the state summons EPA back to this site again, instead of reactivating and unarchiving a site that they had let go, they created a new site and put it on the victim's property. And they ran a separate site for 11 years. Up until 2007 and through that year, the EPA had spent $326,000 of taxpayer money. Since 2008, the numbers of taxpayer monies that have been expended without a cleanup and without city water being provided and without any accountability for the contaminator, there have been $10.6 million spent. And once again, our community has been left in the lurch where we have had no help from our federal officials, both elected and appointed. And we are not going to take that any longer. Today's article in the Citizen Times reminds us that while they were warned in 2002 by their own officials that a cleanup had to be undertaken and completed to keep the contaminant from hitting the groundwater, they did nothing. Redundant tests, incessant excuses, wastes of money, and people getting sick and people dying. Now, the groundwater table has risen. And according to EPA, it is now 10 to 15 feet below the plant, which means the contaminant that they were concerned about has been engulfed with the groundwater table. This is the worst case scenario because the contaminant is heavier than water. It will now be released all over again. We are demanding accountability for those that are responsible, not only within the agencies, but those that are elected and entrusted to protect us. We are calling for congressional hearings in Washington. 6 years ago, we participated in local field hearings. There was no sworn testimony. 6 years later, $10.6 million had been spent, no cleanup. More people getting sick, more people dying. We have been very cooperative despite our impassioned pleas and desperate voices for help. We have been provided virtually nothing except one soundbite after another. And while one concern has been the devaluation of our properties, the greater concern is the devaluation of human life, wildlife, and the environment. And if it's happening to us, you can bet that it's happening to others. We should be functioning with the precautionary principle where we are aware of our actions today because of the impacts they can have and the consequences that they will yield in the future. If the people who managed the site in 1999, who responded to what they knew from 1990, created a new site to put on the victim's property, are in control of it today, how can we possibly trust them to carry out a cleanup in the year 2014 when they say that that won't even begin until the year 2016, which will be a full 30 years since that site changed hands from CTS of Asheville to the Mills Gap Road Associates real estate developers. I think we deserve better, we are owed better, and as citizens under the 14th Amendment, we are guaranteed better. So this is a sad day. It is not surprising. The EPA is claiming to have discovered something that they knew to be migrating as of June 25th, June 26, 1990.
As
Change places of tape there right quick.
someone who has been involved with this because I don't want to be, because I'm a homeowner who happened to have the misfortune of purchasing a home within a mile of this site, the EPA has got to stop leaving people out of the loop. It's the homeowners, it's the people that are impacted by this. We shouldn't be reading this in the newspaper. We should have gotten a letter a week ago saying, hey, we're going to put this out in the news. We just want you to be aware so that you're not shocked and upset and stressed and angered once again. That's the biggest problem here. Not only has there been a lack of cleanup, but there's also been a lack of communication. We have some really great people that have helped us along the way, and we have some people that don't seem to care that people are stressed and anxious, and this affects our lives every day. This affects their lives when they're at work, not when they're at home. And I just want this to stop, and I want them to communicate with the homeowners in the community. And I think that it needs to be a model for the rest of the country, because if it's happening in Nashville, North Carolina, then it's happening everywhere. And I just think that if the federal government gets involved, then maybe this won't happen to another small town somewhere in a sleepy little mountain. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we do know that it's happening. It's happening in Waynesville, North Carolina, at Barber Orchard. It's happening at the Acosta plant in Brevard. It's happening at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. This is happening all too frequently. And there are systemic issues that require reform. There can be no reform without accountability. We wouldn't allow these standards to apply to a physician. We wouldn't allow these standards to apply to a bus driver. And we certainly wouldn't let these standards apply to the school teachers. We are simply asking for reform through accountability to ensure that the institution itself can do its job to safeguard human health, the environment, and wildlife. The fact that there is a lack of communication is a prime example that there is a lack of respect for us in this community. And we have had to endure since Dave Ogren called it in, and the state submitted 2 written warnings, to when Bob Taylor called it in, and they came in and created a new site to hide the fact that they had dropped the ball on the old site. If this were in any other situation, in any other region, there would have been congressional hearings. The question is, how is it 2014 and we're talking about a cleanup that hasn't happened yet, but we're talking about expenditures that have exceeded $11 million. How is that possible? That money belongs to all of us, this land belongs to all of us, and this water belongs to all of us. It's shameful, and we deserve better, and we demand better. And in our time of being complacent or cooperative, when it comes to our own expense, we're done with that. We are going to call for many people to get involved from this community and outside of our community to get these hearings underway and get to the bottom of this and let the accountability do what it does. And that reform can come when we have new officials from Region 4 that have no connection to this site take over the actual day-to-day operations. There is no trust in our community for these officials. But we hold out hope and faith that we can believe in other officials who want to do the right thing, guided by the principle of doing what is right.
I'll say something. I'm fairly sure that the 10.6 million or approaching 11 million doesn't include the cost of taking the building down or the current cost of putting in the water lines. The only help that we've got from any government official has been through Representative Tim Moffitt, who found the money, got the building tore down, and also is still looking for the money to put in the water lines. And I understand that is going to be somewhere. The building, I'm a little off, I think was about $275,000 to take down. And the water lines, when it's all done, I think is going to be somewhere north of $4.5 million. And he's the only one single-handedly has helped us by doing that. Thank you.
something to say.